Hello, I'm Todd Perry with PPM Consultants. I'd like to talk to you about SPCC requirements for farmers. The SPCC requirements came out of the Clean Water Act of 1970. In that act, it asked you to prevent discharges of oil and containing discharges. In 1973, the actual spill prevention, control, and countermeasures rule was promulgated. It had a number of changes and amendments and revisions through the years. Most recently, July 2002 began the process to develop the final rule we have today. It was finalized and implemented in November 11th of 2011. However, farmers received an extension until May 10th, 2013. To determine if your facility needs an SPCC plan, you simply consider the volume of oil, gasoline, or diesel, etc., that you contain at your facility. If it's greater than 1,320 gallons, then you will need an SPCC plan. If you have underground storage tanks and they're greater than 42,000 gallons, then you would need an SPCC plan. The facility would use, handle, or store oil. It could have the potential for discharge to the waters of the state. Even non-transportation related facilities, if they have the volume greater than 1,320 gallons, are required to have an SPCC plan. So the compliance dates, just to review a little more history. Facilities that were in operation on or before August 16, 2002 were asked to maintain their existing SPCC plan and then implement the new plan by November 10th, 2011. In a strange turn of events, facilities that began operating August 17, 2002 through November 9, 2011 had a little bit of a grandfather to where they were asked to prepare and implement an SPCC plan by November 10th, 2011, or prior to November 10th, 2011. So that caused some confusion out there. But now, any facility existing or new that comes on operation today is asked to prepare and implement an SPCC plan prior to beginning operations if they have an aggregate containment or an aggregate volume of more than 1,320 gallons of oil, gas, or diesel. And we'll talk about that in some more detail. But let's finish up the extension for farmers. In October 2011, EPA extended the SPCC compliance deadline for farms, NACE codes 111 and 112, to May 10th, 2013. This was because of the floods and fires that occurred in the summer and spring of 2011. Now, there are a couple things in the process that could give farmers an extension or exemption from the SPCC rule. Nothing has been finalized, so as of April the 5th, 2013, farmers are required to have an SPCC plan in place by May 10th, 2013. If something were to change, there would be a lot of ways that we'd want to get that information out to make sure the farmers, your customers, knew that there was a change in the due date or the requirement. So we're going to watch it very closely, and if something happens, we'll make sure that we get that broadcasted out to where everyone knows of the changes. In your SPCC plan, it's going to consider releases to the waters of the state. I want to touch briefly on waters of the state because it's a very big definition. Traditionally, you think of waters that are used for commerce, for recreation, transportation. However, the definition also includes wetlands, low areas that are saturated or can be saturated and support certain types of plants and animals, lakes, rivers, streams, sloughs, bayous, prairie potholes, wet meadows, natural ponds, plow lakes, mud flats, sand flats, etc., the definition gets pretty deep. And it's hard not to go somewhere, certainly in Louisiana, where you're not very close to a water of the state. Now, let's show you a couple examples on farms, slash water, a low area, a ply lake. Here's a picture of what one looks like. Here's something you see for irrigation purposes or for habitat purposes, where you farm right up to the pothole, if you will, on the farm or the pond. And those are certainly waters of the state. So here's a picture of that. So the countermeasure piece of the rule of the SPCC plan, you'll have contingencies for manpower, equipment, materials, and in certain cases, depending on how the site operates, what's it adjacent to, you might be required to have a facility response plan. Those aren't very common unless you get into high commerce areas. Rivers kind of come to mind to where you have to kind of step up and consider security and some more areas for some response plan. But most farmers are going to simply need, if they have more than 1,320 gallons of storage, an SPCC plan. There are some exemptions. If you have no storage container, tank, vessel, bucket that is greater than 55 gallons, so you could have, let's say, 300 5-gallon buckets, which would be 1,500 gallons. You would not have to have an SPCC plan because no vessel, single vessel, is greater than 55 gallons of storage. Permanently closed containers, motive power containers, for instance, tanks that might be attached to a tractor, some type of farm equipment, wastewater treatment facilities, hot mix asphalt, pesticide application equipment. And then if the tank's buried, then you would not have to worry as much, unless it's more than 42,000 gallons of storage, about SPCC plans. But as many of you know, there's a whole world of UST requirements that you would have to consider. There are 3 types of SPCC plan: a professional engineered or PE certified plan, a Tier 2 self-certified plan, and a Tier 1 self-certified plan. Let me help you understand the difference between these 3 plans. On a professional engineer certified plan or PE certified plan, facilities with more than 10,000 gallons of total storage, you would need to have a PE certified plan. If you've had a discharge within the previous 3 years of more than 1,000 gallons, you would need a PE certified SPCC plan. Or if you've had 2 or more discharges of 42 gallons or more in a 12-month period within the last 3 years, you would need a PE certified SPCC plan. To consider the self-certified plans, there are 2 types. The Tier 1 is the simplest. That would be, you would have more than 1,320 gallons of volume, but not greater than 10,000 gallons of storage. No single container is larger than 5,000 gallons. You've had no spill history. You could do the Tier 1 template that EPA has provided, and it would count as your SPCC plan. And we'll have a link at the end of the presentation to show you where you can find the template, or you can email us, and we'll give you an email address at the end. We'll be happy to send you a copy of that. On the Tier 2, it would be less than 10,000 gallons of total storage, and you do have a container that's greater than 5,000 gallons, so you might have a 6,000 gallon skid tank or above ground storage tank and a 1,000 gallon skid tank. That'd be 7,000 gallons total. You couldn't do a Tier 1 because you got a vessel that's greater than 5,000 gallons. You've got no qualifying spill history and complete the plan. You could complete the plan without a PE certified stamp or developed plan. You'd want to work with a consultant. They're fairly easy to develop that self-certified form for your facility. Very important, All plans must be signed, approved, reviewed by management with the authority to fully implement the plan. So the owner or the operator of those tanks is asked to have knowledge, to have reviewed, and to put his name on the dotted line of that plan to help ensure that it's obeyed and complied with. Um, every 5 years, if nothing changes, you'll need to review your plan and to document that it's sufficient to meet the operation at the site. If you make some technical changes, and not all are required, but you bring in new tanks, you move a loading rack, something of significance, then every 5 years or when that event occurs, you'd want to consider, if you are required to have a PE certified plan, having that plan recertified. If there are administrative changes to a plan or a PE certified plan, for instance, you bring in a new manager at the site, you do not have to have a new plan written or PE certification redone. You simply note that in the plan. When you make changes, you've got 180 days from the change to make the revisions, and you just simply list the revisions in the plan, so if someone comes up to review it, they can see your current state of operations. When considering the controls of the SPCC requirement, that includes containment, diversionary devices, alarms, overfill protection, loading and unloading procedures, how you'll operate the site. Looking deeper at secondary containment, the containment would be impervious to oil, have no cracks. There would be integrity with the containment. It would have an adequate capacity to hold the largest container plus sufficient freeboard for precipitation. If you were to have a general rule of thumb is 110%, but depending on your tankage and your site, it could be 115% or 120%. If you have to have a PE certified plan, your PE will calculate what size containment you need, but as a rule of general thumb, 110% typically fits the bill. One exception to that is if you have access to NRCS funding to help a farmer with his SPCC plan, they actually ask for some additional containment on top of the large container and then rain event. So those containments tend to be a little bit bigger if you're going through the NRCS. That would be a farmer. That's kind of a division of USDA. That's a group that farmers work with every day. If you say NRCS to a farmer, they'll know what you're talking about. It must be the containment must be maintained and inspected periodically, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. That'll be monthly and annually, and daily too. There's different thresholds of how the inspection occurs. And if you do have drainage to where you have a rain event and you want to drain the rainwater out of the secondary containment, it needs to be controlled by a manually operated valve that is kept closed and locked when you're not actually draining the secondary containment. You need to make sure if you do have a valve that drains your containment, it's not required, but you keep it closed and locked when it is not in use. Some secondary containment types, earth and dikes. If you've got soil that has a very low or permeability, a lot of clay in it, you might be able to use an earthen floor and earthen dikes, concrete containment basin, spray-in liners, diversions, retention ponds, sumps, subsurface sumps can count as containment. If you purchase a double wall tank, that can count as your secondary containment. Here's a look at a spreadsheet that we use to calculate how much volume the secondary containment needs to hold. We simply plug in the tanks at the site, some other information that helps us develop what size containment the facility would need to comply with the SPCC rule. Here's some pictures of different types of containment. Here's a manually constructed wooden containment, if you will, that has a lay-in liner that will hold and suffice as your secondary containment. Here's a prefabricated corrugated steel that has a spray-in liner that can count as your secondary containment. Here is a secondary containment, which is cinder block wall, that they've got some security requirements and they've had to put fencing in because of their operations where they're at to help prevent anyone that's not authorized from accessing the area around those above ground storage tanks. Here's a couple of pictures from the past of inadequate containment. You see some poor housekeeping, some staining. You see just a little bit of containment. You know that's not enough to hold the tanks. It was a good effort, but under the new rules, it doesn't comply. There's another tank that has no secondary containment. So you know those tanks are bigger than 1,320 gallons in total storage, and they need to be caught up to speed. Here's a look at a nice newer facility which has a lot of neat features. The tanks, the loading rack, and where the bobtail might fuel up is all contained. You can see he pulls in. If he were to have a spill or release, it's contained. Where the truck loads, the loading rack's contained, and the tanks are contained. So a really nice setup here. If you had a requirement to where you got some tankage that's over 1,320 gallons aggregate, and you also had some barrels, you didn't want to construct a wall to hold your barrels, here's something you can buy aftermarket, kind of a sump, if you will, that you can set your drum zone to where that would count as secondary containment. The valves on your above ground storage tanks need to be inside the secondary containment. You certainly don't need to have a secondary containment and have your valves for your tanks outside the containment. They need to be inside. Couple things that you're going to need to have on hand: spill kits, fire extinguishers. If there is an accident, if there is a spill, a release, you can respond to it and save yourself a lot of time and headache. Here is an individual responding to a small spill to where they've got a boom to contain it and they're going to absorb it up, and that's certainly not reportable. Under spill prevention, you'll make sure that you're doing training in regards to how you prevent releases from occurring. It helps you with the knowledge and understanding. In certain cases, the security, the inspection schedule, and then the proper facility design and operation. Looking a little bit deeper at training, you'll do periodic training and review of your SPCC plan. You'll do daily, monthly, and annual inspections. You'll document the monthly and annual inspections. And also, you'll want to train as to your loading and unloading and operational procedures around your tanks. For security, if you're required to have a heightened security, you're going to secure the access to the oil handling areas. You can do that by gates and fencing. You want to have lights to prevent vandalism, and if you had a spill, you could see it occurring. You'll make sure that all your valves and drains are locked and secured. And those are some of the areas that you want to consider on the security side of it. Here's a little bit closer look at a compound that has brought in a fence on top of their containment to help protect the tanks and the controls from anyone accessing them that doesn't need to. Now, this is not required at many sites, most sites, if you will. If you're had certain locations, certain operations, facility response plans, the security requirements will step up, and you'll need to be mindful of that. Most farmers, unless they wanted to, would not have to have. Secondary containment is going to be the biggest thing they're going to focus on. The security would be something that they'd certainly have the plan, but they wouldn't have to go to certain extremes. On the inspection schedule, daily you're going to certainly observe any kinds of spills, stains, seeps, leaks, liquids that could come from your operation, your tank, your loading rack, etc. Monthly, you'll document those, and in your SPCC plan, there's some forms you can work off of to document those monthly inspections, and annually is a more robust and rigorous inspection to where you'll look at your facility and make sure it's in good condition and operating as it should. When you're doing inspections, you'll be looking for corrosion, rust, pitting, making sure your valves and stars are closed and locked, proper grounds are there, any visible leaks or staining, that your secondary containment it is set and has not been compromised with a crack or knocked down, if you will. There are requirements in certain cases for tank integrity, and we'll talk about those in a moment. And then, of course, you'll be prepared in the unfortunate event that you might have a spill or a fire. Make sure you have your fire extinguishers, spill kits. Your people are trained on how to use those, and you're ready to go. Here's a look at some tanks that are beginning to exhibit some corrosion, and I think everyone could agree that there was a good effort made for containment, but we might calculate that, and that containment might not be sufficient. It might be sufficient, but they've got bigger issues with corrosion on their tanks. Here's another look at a tank that's showing corrosion. And here's a worst case. As you can see, the bottom of this tank is really beginning to fail. That is where your tanks are the weakest, where they encounter the ground, the bottom of the tanks. That's where, if you have a failure, that's where it's going to come from. So you really want to pay attention to what's going on around the bottoms of your tank, and you don't want to wake up and have corrosion, and certainly corrosion to the point that the tank begins to fail and cause releases. Even if you have good secondary containment, it's not a good position to find yourself in. Here's another picture of a valve that's closed and locked in the closed position. Here, as you look through the secondary containment for these tanks, there's an animal that is burrowed into the secondary containment. You need to inspect for those. If you find those, you certainly need to move the burrowing animal, prevent it from digging into the secondary containment, and then make repairs to the areas that it bored into and made your secondary containment at risk for failure. Looking at containment integrity, inspect for any cracks, knockdowns, crumbling that could cause your secondary containment to not be secure and hold any liquids that might come in. If it's not a good idea to have piping coming through your secondary containment. If you do, you want to make sure that those are tight and that oil cannot seep through around those. And if you're doing a new construction, under no circumstance, those lines should be on top of, not in your secondary containment. So I mentioned tank integrity testing. This is a rule that a lot of us are just coming up to speed on for above ground storage tanks. When you purchase a new tank, there's a baseline that your manufacturer or your contractor who puts the tank in will conduct to ensure the tank's tight when it's installed and doesn't have a crack or a hole or ability to lose your oil to the surface. There's a testing schedule depending on size and how your tank is set up, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. If you're required to do a tank inspection, it must be conducted by a certified tank inspector. And then once you, whatever records you're asked to maintain, you'll keep those on file for the life of the tank. So here's a table that helps you understand the tank integrity testing schedule. It's based on setup and volume. So let's talk about setup first. There's simply Category 1 and Category 2. Category 1 is where you've got a concrete floor or liner, or it's above the ground, or where you can inspect or see if a leak occurs on the bottom of the tank, it will run out to where you could see that you've got a failure occurring. Category 2, a good example of that would be your tank is sitting your soils at your site are impermeable enough that you can use it as secondary containment. You've got earth and dike, but that tank is sitting on the ground or where you cannot readily see the bottom of the tank. That would be a category 2, because if a failure would occur in the bottom of the tank, then you would not be able to see it and it would work its way into the ground, and that would be a bad position to fall into. So that's the difference between category 1 and 2. Thinking about volume, if you've got a tank that is greater than 1,320 gallons in total aggregate storage volume, but you have no vessel, no tank that's greater than 1,100 gallons, then you would simply document monthly your inspections, and annually there's no tank integrity testing required for that size tank. If you've got vessels that are between 1,101 gallons and 5,000 gallons, you would do your periodic inspections monthly and annually. Externally, if you were in a category 1, there is no requirement for a certified integrity test or a leak test on a category 1, 5,000 down to 1,101 gallons. If you have a category 2 tank, a tank that's sitting on the ground where you cannot readily see the bottom of that tank, if there is a failure, every 10 years you need to have an inspector certify the tank, do an external inspection, and a leak test done on that above ground storage tank. If your tank is larger than 5,001 gallons, up to 30,000 gallons, you'll continue to do your periodic inspections monthly and annually. If you're in a category 1, you are required to do an external tank test by a certified inspector once every 20 years and are not required to do a leak test. If you have a category 2 tank where you cannot readily see the bottom of the tank, it's sitting on the ground, if there's a failure, you cannot see that the tank has failed as it's sitting on the ground, you are asked to do an external certified tank inspection from a certified inspector once every 5 years and a leak test once every 10 years. We'll be very happy. I'll give you an email address at the end. Any questions you might have on this rule, email us, give us a call. We'll be very happy to help you understand it in more depth. So if you do have a reportable release, here's some phone numbers to call. In Louisiana, the one you need to know is the DEQ single point of contact, 225-925-6595. If EPA or the National Response Center need to be notified, your single point of contact will do those notifications or help you get those notifications made. They'll also notify state police, etc., any other responders, local fire departments, etc., to help you stop the release and contain it before it does any damage. Here's some useful links, and I'll talk about these. EPA has a couple of places where you can go for SPCC guidance. You could pause the presentation and copy these down if you'd like. Again, you can email us. We'll be happy to email these links to you. EPA Region 4 also has a site where you can look for SPCC frequently asked questions. There is SPC guidance for regional inspectors on the EPA website that you can take a look at to see what the inspectors are looking for. And then DEQ has some information regards to SPCC plans in Louisiana. So those are some links you can have if you'd like to do some additional research and homework on the topic. As we wrap up our presentation, thank you for taking time to listen to us. If you have any questions, please email us at spcc@ppmco.com. That email address again, spcc@ppmco.com. Anything that we could help you with, provide the self-certified Tier 1 template to you, help you understand any part of this presentation further. There are no bad questions. Feel very free to ask what you might like. We'll do our best to help you. Thanks again for taking time to listen, and I look forward to helping you guys any way I can. Thank you.